Hello, hello, and welcome to CatalystMLM. I'm Brian Switchko, and today on the show we have Michelle Geyer. Michelle has 15 years of experience developing custom web applications, but also has diverse work experience that enabled her to communicate in layman's terms all of the technical stuff. That came from her customer service experience and other experience in working with people. She has become an accredited trainer with Daily Marketing Coach, started MichelleGeyer.com, has twin 4-year-old boys. That's difficult to say. Twin 4-year-old boys, and is a stay-at-home mom. Thanks so much for being on.
I'm happy to be here, Brian.
So before the boys, because that's a whole part of your story, an adorable part of your story, which is continually more adorable. But before that, like, tell me more about when you were, getting out of school and going into work, and what your life was like before kids.
Wow. You take me way back now.
It's like a few years, right?
No, it's quite a few more than that. No, that's a while. Oh gosh, now I feel old. So anyway, well, before that, I graduated from college, and started working in, the business world. I started out as an accounting assistant, that type of thing. Had worked various jobs while I was in school. And really looking for something that would fit me, fit my personality, that type of thing. I like working with people, but yet, I kind of like the independence of being able to do my own thing and kind of like be in charge of my destiny, so to speak. And so that's, I started out, like I said, as an accounting assistant, and then got some opportunities to really grow out of that and started doing more technical things. Started working on the company website and things like that. And then that morphed into database applications, and then that morphed into all kinds of really cool stuff that, I do have this tremendous technical background where I started developing web-based database applications, for private nonprofits and educational nonprofits, that type of thing. So that's giving me that opportunity to give back and yet build something and feel like I was creating something and being able to see the results of that. And so there's always been kind of this part of me that wanted to build something, create something that was my own. And I never really put the finger on it, put my finger on it to say that, what I really wanted to do is be my own boss and build my own business.
Right.
It's like it kind of started out as this idea of creating things and building things and that type of thing. And that now has morphed into this whole thing of creating my own business.
And looking back, it's really easy to see, but it's like you look back and you see those pieces like, man, that was pretty clear now, but it's hard to determine in the meantime. You have to go through that journey.
Exactly.
So I think Jim Rohn talked about a lot about it being like the right time. So, it's not, it might not be the right time for you. You have to wait and then someone might come back to you. So people talk about not pushing prospects, but in terms of your time, how did it translate into that thought of like, I should be my own boss?
Really a lot of what kind of like how it came about was just like kind of on the cusp of when my wife and I started talking about having children and thinking about, okay, well, what does that look like? What do I want our life to look like and be like and things like that? Like I'm going to go through this whole process to have children. Like what's on the other end of that? And what does that look like? And so I really started thinking about, what is it that I want to do? That type of thing. I had a really great cushy job with wonderful benefits, health and retirement and all kinds of great stuff. That, it was okay in the sense of like I was doing my thing where I was building things and feeling like I was creating things and everything, but it wasn't like, wow, this is it.
Yeah.
And then I got pregnant with the boys, and it was, obviously twins.
Well, tell that story a little bit, because that wasn't something that you expected.
It was not at all what I expected. I was like, Hello. My mom, we joke that it was all my mom's fault because she kept saying that she wanted me to have twins. Um, and I was like, it's your
I would
fault.
say that it's her fault.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, of course. Well, but anyway, I was 7 weeks pregnant, and we went into the doctor because I had a miscarriage previously, and so we were kind of, like I really wanted to know that there was a strong heartbeat and that everything was good. And so we went into the doctor, and she kind of told us like what to expect, and you'll see this dark circly spot, and then there'll be a little white sort of blob in the middle, for lack of a better description. There's not much form at that point.
Yeah.
And she turned the machine on, and we immediately saw two dark circles and two little white blobs. And I was like, is that what I think it is? And she's like, I think so, but let me confirm. And just our lives just radically altered from that moment forward. And I have that she took a picture of the ultrasound, and I still have that as on my desk, because it's like that really was the moment that my whole life transformed and changed for so many reasons and on so many different levels. And it was a somewhat challenging pregnancy towards the end. I was healthy all the way through, but I did start having a lot of contractions and things like that towards the end, so I had to go on bed rest. Modified at home. It wasn't that, it wasn't like medically urgent, but just making sure that they stayed where they were and that they stayed there as long as possible. And got a good shot, and then I ended up giving birth at 36 weeks. They were perfectly healthy. They stayed with us the whole time, no NICU time or anything like that. But having that time period where I was kind of forced to slow down, which is also something that I'm not all that great at.
Know the feeling.
But kind of being forced to slow down and really think about, okay, what am I doing? What does this all mean? And really at that moment, I realized that, that these two little beings are the most important thing in my life, like no matter what, these little guys are going to come first. And so, after I stayed home with them for the first 6 months, and then my job's kind of like, so are you coming back? And like, what are you doing? So then I went back for a little while, and we had gotten a nanny for the boys, and
what was your thought process going into that? Like, what had you been thinking during that 6 months? I mean, other than pregnancy, and I mean, what were you thinking about work?
It really was this kind of defining moment where it was like, what is it that I want to do with my time, and how do I want to spend my time, and what's important to me? And, yes, healthcare was particularly important, definitely at that time. And I was really happy to have that health insurance. But,
they do the thing where they show you the bill and then show you that it's zeroed out at the bottom, and you're like, if I had to pay for that.
Oh yeah, and like double everything, it's like, double the room and board, even though they were in room with us, and what I mean, there was just all kinds of stuff. That those bills were horrendous, but yeah, I think there was just a lot of
you got a
really
discount on your second one.
Yeah, you would think so, like a two for one special or something. No, it doesn't work that way. But just really a lot of it was just kind of this period of soul searching, just for lack of anything else to do. I kind of ran through all the series on Netflix and stuff like that, things to do, and really was sort of forced to turn inward and figure out what it was that motivated me, that moved me, that what is it that I'm looking for? And so it's like when it was time to go back to work, I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll give this a shot. And, because I mean, I was making 6 figures, and I was, doing, there were things that were really good about it, And
Healthcare
so,
and money.
yeah, healthcare and money, those are kind
Yep.
of important. And so, I really struggled with it once I did go back to work because I was paying somebody else to take care of my children. And I had tried so hard to get to the point where I could have those children,
Hmm.
and have them in my life to then just be like, okay, I'll see you in 8 hours,
Right, right.
and it's like that just did not work for me. It
Yeah.
just didn't,
Well, and so many people have that same thought process, but they don't consider that there's ever another option. So why were you different? Why did you change your mind about that?
hmm I really started looking for ways that I could make some kind of money and not have to leave the house,
Yeah.
not have it be that, okay, I've got to go and sit in, an office from, 8 to 5 or, that type of thing where it's like, what can I do from home? What can I work around my life and have my work around my life as opposed to having to shape my life around
Yep.
my job. It's like it's such a different mentality, such a different way of looking at life and being able to say, okay, rather than changing everything in my life that I'm doing in order to have it work for this job, how can I earn the money that I need? Because I know I need some kind of income. How is that going to come in and still be able to prioritize what's the most important to me? What are the
Right.
most important things to me? And for me, that was time with my boys. It's like you know, um, not missing out on that. Because it was like it was heart wrenching. I mean, I can't even like begin to explain some of those emotions of like just being like, oh, I have to leave, and it's just kind of being like this, like, oh,
And it
you know,
doesn't help when the nanny is like, "Oh, this happened today, and it was so adorable. Check out this picture on my iPhone," and you missed it.
exactly, exactly, and it's that feeling of like, you know, like I said, I wanted these children so badly,
Yep.
and then to be like, okay, here you go, and you get to see, their first giggle, or you get to see their first whatever, or that type of thing, and oh, can you record it for me, or what I mean, like, it's just not, it's not the same,
Yeah.
and fortunately, I was in a position to be able to say, this isn't working for me
Yep.
and I need to figure something else out, because I mean, there are a lot of moms that have to be out there in the workforce, that there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and, I get that. And by no means at all is what I'm doing or what I'm talking about a criticism of that, because it's like, you know, I was in a fortunate enough position to be able to say, I want to figure out how to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to figure out how to be a work-at-home mom.
Right.
I want to make this work. And I had an extremely supportive partner who's willing to let me do that and be like, I'm all in, I'm all behind you, let's figure out how to make this work, and it's that can be really challenging for a lot of moms,
Yeah. Absolutely.
is being able to have the support of your significant other, because if they don't get what you're trying to do,
Yep.
it's just that much more of a hurdle, that much one more thing
Yeah.
that's kind of like,
And it's close to home too. I mean, family, spouses, anyone who's close to you, those are the
Mhm.
words that sting the most. And we always talk about
Exactly.
positive mindset, but if the toxicity to your mindset is 2 feet away from you all the time, then it's a lot more toxic.
Exactly. Exactly. And
So
that's hard.
how did that lead into you finding your first opportunity?
Mhm. So yeah, so I was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do?
Mm.
And a friend of mine actually had told me about a company that she had heard about. She wasn't even involved in the company, that type of thing. She's like, oh, I think they do, work from home stuff. You should check this out,
Yeah.
and just completely, somewhat random. And so I did. And, I was like, checking out the company and, what is it like? And, what can I do? And, that sort of thing. I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. And, everybody will love these products. And, all those things that, it's like, oh, now I cringe. Now I'm like, oh, Michelle. But, I was so enamored. And I just, I thought this was going to be it, and it was going to be a walk in the park and no problem, and all I have to do is tell my friends about it and they will love it, and I'll just get sales out the wazoo. And it's just, it's like I was so naive.
Were you told that, or that was just what you had built up in your head?
Yeah, that was totally what I had built up in my head, at first. And then that was reinforced.
Right.
It's like I had this concept of like, oh, well, I love this stuff, so why wouldn't anybody else?
Yeah.
Or why wouldn't everybody else? And then when I finally did connect up with someone as a sponsor, then it just, she reinforced all of those, like,
right.
Pie in the sky, oh, you get 3 that get 3 and you'll be no problem. And, that kind of, all those things that, like I said, now I just cringe when I hear, because I'm like, okay, you certainly most definitely can be successful, and there are ways that you need to go about doing that, and you will have to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you talk to 100 people, you'll make $100 million within 10 days.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like all that just, oh, yeah.
So what was the biggest challenge that you faced early on that made you realize that wasn't the reality?
Oh God. So I called everybody, right? Because of course, you make your names list, and like everybody that you have ever talked to in Starbucks, even, it's like, write everybody down.
My mailman.
Exactly. Or the waitress at the restaurant. And, it's like, I mean, just, oh, yes. Writing down all those people and making those lists and, contacting all of my Facebook friends and, you know what I mean? Just, oh, and it's like coming from the tech background, it's like, I get the concept of spam, you know what I mean? And I somehow just did not, like, Michelle, you're spamming people. Hello. You know what I mean? It's like, and I was so naively enthusiastic that it kind of became this like show up and throw up.
Yeah.
Like I'd just be like talking to people and just like, oh, this is so wonderful. And oh, you should try this. And oh, da, 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 da. And just so, and it's great to be enthusiastic, and it's like being aware of the other person's response to you at the same time, and not just kind of being like,
yeah. I think spam is always defined as like, any kind of form of contact, email, mail, whatever it may be, that's unwanted.
Exactly.
And I think the caveat to that is to make people want it, and then it's not spam.
Exactly. And that's the difference. Is I was very much in this, when I first started out, I was very much in that mindset of like, oh, I have to talk to everybody. I have to tell everybody about this. Otherwise, because that's what they told me to do.
Right.
And you think
you're not doing your job if you don't.
Right. Yeah. That's what and you'll call everybody. And after you call everybody, once you get to the bottom of the list, then you'll start at the top again. And, it's like,
I haven't heard that one before.
Oh, it's just like that. Oh,
so when you realized that, I mean, what did you change?
Well, I just, I realized that, first of all, it wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah.
I wasn't liking what I was doing. I didn't feel good about what I was doing, and I'm like, it's like when people start to avoid you, you know what I mean? Because you just won't shut up about it. It's kind of like, hello, let's clue in a little bit that you're doing something wrong here, And so really what I stepped back from that and said, okay, this obviously isn't working. I've asked everybody and their brother and their mother if they want to have a home party, and that kind of thing. And it's just not happening. So what can I do differently? There's got to be a way to make this work, because I know it can. And so I started searching online, and, I'm like, there's got to be, this isn't a new problem.
Right. Right.
It's like, why am I trying to reinvent the wheel, right? There's got to be a way to do this. Um, and so when I was looking, I came across Ann Sieg and the Renegade Network Marketer. And so I read that book and I was like, okay, this makes sense to me, because the whole concept behind that book is attraction marketing, and the idea that ultimately it all boils down to teaching sells, that if you're teaching people information, you're teaching them something that they want to know, that they want to learn, then they'll naturally come to you. They'll naturally be attracted to what you're doing. And then you have the opportunity to have further conversations and things like that. So rather than chasing people down and trying, that whole, like, that 3-foot rule, talk to anybody that comes within 3 feet of you, and I'm just like, oh, I hate that.
I've seen that backfire way too many times.
Oh yeah, I'm like, nobody wants to be pitched when they're in line at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Yeah, it's just bad. So anyway, I really was feeling like, like I said, I didn't like the way I felt.
Right.
Doing these kind of like these old school methods, and realizing too that, like I said, there had to be a better way of doing this. And then that combined with my tech skills, I'm like, bring it online.
Right. Yep.
It's like, let's think about this in a different way. What do I have to offer? What can I share with people? What skill set do I already have that makes me different from every other rep in this company?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how, what do I have to offer? What do I bring to the transaction?
Yeah.
So that it's not just a, oh, well, this is the same thing that you're going to see from Mary Jane down the street. And, she's also a rep for, Go-Go Juice or, whatever, XYZ, that type of a concept,
right.
So it's like, I really started reflecting on that and realized that, okay, I do have a lot to offer. I do have, things that make me unique and that will naturally draw people who are interested in what I have to offer.
Right.
And that's the difference, like what you mentioned earlier about, the difference between the kind of that caveat of what makes it spam and what's not.
Yep.
If they want the information, then it's not. And so finding ways to naturally draw people to me that wanted the information that I had, and being able to be at home and have the people come to me rather than me going out there and pestering people to host a home party or
right.
those kinds of things. It's like, okay, the internet allows us to have a much bigger pool of people.
Yep.
And if they're coming to us, then that's the difference.
And I think the messaging of it changes a lot too, because I always use a metaphor of a railroad track, because if you're what's the locomotive? Yeah. If you're the engine, you're at the front, and
right.
you're, backwards, kind of like, come on, get on my track. Come on, let's go. And then nobody comes, like, hey, we're going to do this. And then you don't. Then you have to go back and come on. And you do that enough times and people just see you on the same piece of track doing this. Right. Whereas when you flip that and you start looking at, what you have to offer and putting that out there, you're basically just going down the track. And then, you can get behind me if you so choose, and you just keep moving. Right. So the question here is, and you actually wrote a blog about it, but what do you say to the people who think that they don't have anything to offer? I mean, tech skills is one thing, but, people often think that they don't have anything, and that's right. Never true.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think that moms in particular struggle with this in a different way, I think, than a lot of people do, simply because we become so focused on what we're doing, for our families or, work or, those kinds of things, that it's like we forget that we're people too. It's like
you should become a servant.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's like what you were saying, like, oh, what was life like before kids? I'm like, I struggled to answer that. I mean, you saw me. I'm like, what was life like before kids? It's kind of this like, I don't remember that far back. We get so caught up in that role
Right.
that we discount everything that we have and all the skills that we have. And there is on top of whatever you have, whatever life experience you have, or whatever skill set you have, that type of thing, just by virtue of being a mom, it's like you've created this skill set that you have to be organized.
Yep.
You have to keep track of things. You have to know where the lovey is. You have to know where the shoes are and the jacket. And it's like there's this level of awareness and this complexity that you automatically learn to multitask. You automatically learn to keep many things on the fire at the same time,
Right.
and that type of thing. And it's a different way of being. It's a different skill set, that type of thing. And there is always something that, just as a person, mom or not, just there's something that everybody knows, some sort of information that you have up here in your head floating around that someone else would pay to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, there's, obviously there's a big emerging trend of mommy bloggers, and that's proof that, that mindset really does parlay and kind of switch over. You just have to go, okay, I have this amazing skill. I'm going to use it over here. And I think the other thing to look at there too is that, you talk about, something to offer, that knowledge that someone wants to do. Like if you, let's say, have a YouTube channel and you make a 1-minute video about random stuff, every once in a while, then it's not really going to be successful. But if if you focus on that thing that you've chosen that you have to offer and you do it consistently, then that almost always works. So what have you helped people to discover as their thing that they didn't really expect could be something that they could use in that regard?
Right. Well, a lot of people think that, the concept of writing a book or, that type of thing, or being able to put a video together or things like that. People get freaked out about those concepts, because it sounds so big. It sounds so huge. And one of the nice things about technology and kind of like living in this day and age is that it's so easy to do those things now. It's like to be able to, we're talking, across the world on Skype right now. You know what I mean? It's like
the signal is going to space and back.
Exactly. So it's like being able to put together a series of videos that demonstrate how you do something, or writing a short ebook and being able to publish that as a PDF, or, there's all kinds of ways that you can take talents and knowledge that you already have and translate that into the online arena, and to be able to then translate that into income for your family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's a few people that I've worked with. I'm thinking of some of my coaching clients and things like that. And there have been a few people that, they're like, oh, I don't know. And, I don't have anything to offer, and, things like that. And I'm like, okay, but what did you do before you had kids? And okay, now let's talk about that. And don't you think that would be helpful information for people to know?
Right.
And it just, it's like, cause like we kind of like, we check our skill set, or we check our our accomplishments kind of like at the door when we come online. So many people do that. They're like, oh, well, if they think that if they don't know the tech side of it, that then they don't know anything, which is so not true.
I think it's important to point out, and you kind of just made me think of this, is that most people, I won't say a lot of people, most people graduate college with a degree and don't use that. You start talking to people like, oh, I'm in financial services, oh, I went to school to be a teacher. I went to school for graphic design. I don't use that. I hired a designer to make the site. And so, kind of thinking of that and then saying, all right, my degree is in this, my education is in this, but I'm doing this, whatever it may be, and kind of thinking back and I guess putting people in a position where they think to like their college age self, and they're like, would my college age self know how to do this? Well, no, absolutely not, because I learned it.
Exactly.
And remembering that you can learn other things too, and how to
Right.
communicate the stuff that you already know.
Right. Exactly. And that's a huge thing too. It's like that, being able to look at something and really say, okay, this is information that people could benefit from, and finding a way to share that. And also saying to yourself, well, what do I want to learn about? What interests me? And then as you're learning whatever that is, that skill or that whatever, take the time to write about it or do videos about it or anything along those lines, because you have a beginner's mindset in that moment, and you're going to ask the questions that somebody following you is going to ask and want to know. So take advantage of that learning process.
Experts don't.
Exactly. Exactly. Because they don't think about it that way anymore. It's like they don't know those questions because they're so far removed from that. So it's like anytime you learn something, take the time to say like, okay, well, what do I want to know, or what are my questions, or that type of thing, and just write about it, blog about it, create videos about it, those kinds of things. And I think that there's something that is really genuine about that people are drawn to and attracted to be like, oh, okay, I get that. I totally have that question too, or those kinds of things.
It's the same reason that Dirty Jobs is so popular, is because everybody wants to like follow along. You're like, I would do that too. And there's a lot of I always joke around, and I don't watch that much TV these days, but it's kind of like I figured out how TV works. Is that pretty much every TV series, if you go back to season 1, episode 1, there's someone introduced to a group of people that already exists, and the entire series follows that person. So if you look at like Scrubs or Big Bang Theory, whatever it may be, there's a new person entering a situation, and the series follows that person, and people kind of forget about that. But it's those little like, I just learned this, here's my life, this is what's happening right here and now. And so many people think that they need to achieve that mastery before they start sharing. So not going over how to set up a WordPress blog, because there's people for that, there's guides for that, there's YouTube videos. Not talking about how to set up YouTube or how to actually post content. There's guides for that. Once you've gotten the content out there, once you're starting to generate some interest, some comments, we talk about having a form on there so that, people can put in their email and say, I like your 3-page ebook that you wrote over the course of 3 weeks while changing diapers, tell me more. And so when someone actually does opt in and give their email address saying that they want more, now what?
Right. Exactly. And that's what I think so many people struggle with, because a lot of what we learn is we're just trying to get people to opt in. We're just trying to get leads. Everybody's focused on the almighty lead, and how do you get people in, and that sort of thing. And then there's this like, okay, now what do I do with them now that they're here? And really what you need to do at that point is start building relationships with people. It's like, for me, a big part of how I run my business, and I now have Mama Means Business is my primary website and things like that. That's now my where I'm headed, because that's my target market. That's my particular target market. That's my niche. That's who I talk to. And so,
and I couldn't market to that niche.
Right. It's a completely different. I mean, you could, but it might not be as successful. It's like, you could try it. I mean,
a lot of marketing.
It's like there's a making sure that you are connecting with people in a way that's genuine.
Right.
Because ultimately, I feel like what it kind of, if I had to boil it all down, people are going to buy things from people that they know, like, and trust.
Yep. Yeah.
So if you don't let them get to know you, if there's, if it looks like there isn't a real person behind the site, then it's kind of like, it's some big corporation or, whatever kind of a thing. I don't know who they are, or, that type of thing.
And a lot of people, I think, opt in because they're interested, curious. And if they get that kind of template, just blanket, dry response, then they're no longer interested. They're like, not interested. Like they're curious and then they're not interested versus curious and then attracted. And that genuine, connection is definitely there. But so for all the skeptics who are like, well, if, I build a relationship, then what? I think, and it's the name of a book that I have sitting in front of me, which I'm very eager to read, but Jab, 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 Right Hook. Because you're jab, 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 you're like, hey, here's some stuff. Hey, you might like this. Hey, you might like this. And then, do you want to buy this? And don't go for the sale right away, and don't offer them things or offer value or build that relationship just to make the sale.
Right.
It happens, and that people say that all the time, but have you had any experience with kind of like saying, this is how that happens?
I think that for me, the way that I run my business is that I am making sure that I am providing value. So an email does not go out unless there's something of value in it, right? I'm like, I'm not just there to tell you, come buy my thing, because that turns me off,
right?
And for me, luckily, I am my target market. You know what I mean? It's like that's kind of handy.
Yeah.
So it's like it's real easy for me to kind of gauge the BS meter, and like, if I'm writing something and I was like, oh, I wouldn't read that crap. I mean, it's a real easy way to be like, hold on, Michelle, let's think about this. What are you doing? And so I think that there's a real way to approach people, and you're providing value, you're providing content, and that there's a natural progression to it. There's a natural flow, so that it isn't like, like you said, like, here's this. Oh, by the way, here, buy my thing,
Boom.
Exactly. You can tell I'm not a boxer, right? Because I'm all this way. But it's important to me that for my business that people understand who I am and what I do and what's important to me, what I value, those kinds of things, because that's what I look for in someone that I'm, going to buy something from. I'm going to look for someone that's being genuine and real. I'm looking for, I mean, I live on the West Coast of the United States. So I'm very much the like, support your local small businesses, and you know what I mean. Like that's a thing here. I'm in the San Francisco. Yeah, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's like there's we're really like focused on that, and so I look for people that are real. That are genuine and that are providing value, that aren't just out there going sell, because that drives me batty.
Yeah.
As a customer, and I'm like, if that's all I am to you is a sale, then I'll take my business somewhere else where the person actually cares about the other person on the other end of the email. Yeah. So, and
go ahead.
I personalize things a lot. I include a lot of stories about my kids or what's going on with us or what we're doing or things like that, where it's like I'm giving people that opportunity, that chance to get to know me, and that when someone emails me and says, oh, well, what about this thing, or have you heard about this, or whatever, they're going to get a personal response.
Right.
That they know is from me, it's from a real person, and they're going to get my real opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not going to like sugarcoat things or, those kinds of things, because I've been able to build that relationship and build the trust with, the people that I work with.
And that's what a friend would do too, is that if a friend says, should I always go to dating, should I date this guy? Like, I don't, I've been on like 4 dates and this is, like, they're going to give an honest opinion. And if it's not a good match for whatever reason, I'll stop because I'll start talking voices. Then basically they say, no, don't go on another date. I do impressions very poorly quite often. But so you mentioned it before we started recording, but you were talking about appearance on video as well, because you want to be real in that sense too, and not, walking out into a video and doves releasing and you're like, this is how I enter the house when I have 2 boys. Like, how do you communicate that on video and when you put content out?
Mhm. Um,
Not to purposefully like look bad, but
right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't make myself. I try not to make myself look bad. I'm sure there are moments where I do, but you know. But really, again, for me, it's just this real sense of genuineness. And I just got my hair cut short, but I would be doing videos in ponytails, and you know what I mean, those kinds of things. And I'm like, I don't have time as a mom to like get myself all made up and get my hair all done and put on this outfit and like pretend like I'm in, I don't know, some photo studio somewhere, and it's quiet and there's beautiful music playing in the background and there's probably some fountain somewhere, and that's like that's not me. That's not my life.
Yeah. You also forgot the wind blowing and having your
Oh
hair.
yes, the wind blowing in my hair. Yes. Um, it's like my life is that I have two boys that think that I'm a jungle gym, and they will be crawling up all over me, and I'm trying to send an email, and or I'm having a Skype call with my accountability partner, who my kids now know as Auntie, because they get involved in the conversation so
That's
much.
awesome.
It's just kind of this this thing where they are a huge part of my life.
Right.
And I don't make any pretense of like separating that out. It's like I'm going to be on the phone with somebody and it is going to sound like there were banshees released in the other room. It's like that's what's going to happen, because there were. Exactly. Or the dog is now dressed in clothing, or you know what I mean? It's like, there's any number of things. I think
Mental picture there. I need pictures.
I know. I will get you pictures. There was actually this. I really do have this one picture, where one of my boys. I was on a training call and I was, being all professional and like leading the call and everything. And I had put, I don't know, Thomas or the Octonauts or some show on for them for a half an hour. I'm like, it's a half an hour, right? I'm like,
what's
it'll
the
work.
worst that could happen?
It'll work. Yeah, what's the worst that could happen? And after my
Famous
call,
last words.
I know, exactly. I come out into the living room and my son had stripped completely naked and painted his entire body blue. And I'm like, okay, so that's showing some skills. Okay, so the two of them collaborated to get up into the drawer where the paint was, because they had to work together to get up that high. And you know what I mean? It's this. It was hysterical. I mean, because all I could do was laugh.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, what are you gonna do? Right? And I'm like, okay, you're blue. And I'm like, okay.
And I'm a demon die.
Yeah, it's like, woohoo. So that's the reality of my life.
Right.
That's that I'm constantly multitasking. I'm constantly doing more than one thing at a time. And that's the me that you're going to see. That's what I'm going to share with people. And there's a certain attractiveness about that. There are some people that they're like, okay, no, they want like the professionally done video, and they want the, that's the experience that they want. And those just simply aren't my clients.
Right.
It's like those aren't the people that are going to naturally be attracted to me. And that's the other thing too. I think that people try to market to everyone. They're like, that whole idea, like everyone is my client, or everyone is, everybody has skin and they're all going to want my skin product, or, whatever. Right. It's this idea of like, focus it down, like really, like who is really genuinely your target market? Who do you most relate to? Who most relates to you?
Yeah.
And that may or may not be other people that are just like you. It's like, for me, that's what works for me. Right. But not everybody's target market is themselves. It's kind of handy and convenient for myself. But,
and that's
because I am working with other moms.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people struggle with, is they try and kind of appeal to everyone and therefore appeal to no one. And it's the old adage of is it 100%? I'd rather have 1% of something than 100% of nothing.
Right.
And it's like if you try and appeal to, like, there's a million people on, there's a billion people on Facebook, and if I get a 0.00001% conversion rate, then I'll be a millionaire. And it's like, well, you're not going to, because you can't appeal to that many people. So speak kind of on that same level. I mean, you talk a lot about your tech skills, obviously, your mom's skills, but there's the other piece that you kind of keep mentioning. But where did you get your people skills? Like, where did you learn to communicate with people in this way?
That's a good question. Um, I think that for me, it started pretty young, simply because my mom was a professional clown, believe it or not.
That is awesome.
Isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
It's really kind of cool, like growing up.
Bring your parent to work day.
Exactly. And so there was this natural outgoingness that she had, even when she wasn't on, as like being the clown, Dusty T clown, even when
Sad
she wasn't
clown, happy clown.
working. Yeah. Happy clown. Yeah. And so, I saw that.
Yeah.
And it's like, especially with clowning, it's like you have to be bigger than life, And so I think that was part of it. Part of it was also that we were a military family, so we moved around a lot. And so by default, I got used to having to talk to new people and having to meet new people and things like that. My older brother and I got very close as a result of that experience too. So I was always kind of like with a much older crowd.
Yeah.
And, so there was a difference, I've always, as a kid, I always interacted better with adults than I did with other kids, just because, like I said, we moved around so much and things like that. Yeah. So there's that aspect that kind of plays into it as well. And then I was on the speech team in high school.
Okay.
So it was like that completely got me over any possible like public speaking fear I could have had.
Right. Well, and public speaking is part of it, and you're very, energetic and eloquent. But back to the spam metaphor, is it how do you do it, and how do you help other people make people want what you're talking about? How do you communicate the connection, the need? How do you? You can't just speak really well and then people will come. You have to say what they want to hear.
Right. Definitely. Well, part of that is kind of what I think of as the message to market match, so that you're making sure that whatever it is that you're sharing is appropriate to your market, and that works interpersonally as well. So that if you are having a conversation with someone and they're a little bit more mellow and they're a little bit more lower energy, that sort of thing, then you match that and you meet that, so that you're not like, and then, and it's like this really high energy and they're like, whoa, like get out of my face.
Yeah.
So, part of it is making sure that you are working with people where they're at. And then part of it is making sure that the actual content is appropriate to the market, so that your message matches the market. And I think that's much, it works so much better that way, rather than like what you were saying earlier about, if you, put it out on Facebook or you spam the entire 1 billion people on Facebook, if that's even possible. It's like, it is, but it'd take a whole heck of a lot. But it's like not everybody's going to respond to the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not going to work. And so making sure that you're crafting your message, both in content and tone, that it matches your market.
Yeah, absolutely. So to someone who's a mom and they're just getting started and they're kind of looking at this and they're like, all right, they're trying to figure out what value they have, what their strengths are, and how they're going to apply it. Are they going to write? Are they going to do video? Are they going to write books? What are they going to do? What do you recommend for people as kind of an evaluative process to find that focus? Oh. Oh, okay. Am I lagging?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag, so I was like, wait, what?
I'm watching the internet speed.
Yeah. I think that there's one of the things that I do with my coaching clients is I basically have them do a skill set list, and really force them to take the time to sit down and be like, okay, you have to spend at least 30 minutes on this question. so that you get the deeper answers,
Yep.
because people are going to be like, oh, I do this, I would do that. And, like, okay, I'm done with that question,
Right.
and you're not really getting them to kind of delve into those things that they don't think about on a daily basis, that really they're good at. The other thing that I ask people to do is talk to their friends and family about what their friends and family think that they're good at.
That's a good one.
Because there's so much that we're like, oh, that doesn't matter. Or, oh, I don't, whatever. We're so poo-poo on ourselves.
Right.
We're like, it's, that's not that big of a deal. Or, oh, well, that comes easily to me, so it would come easily to everybody else too.
Yeah.
And that's so not true. And so asking people to talk to their family, to talk to their friends or coworkers, whatever, like, well, what do you think I'm good at? And really getting that feedback a lot of times from people gives them that little boost of like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is something that I could share with people that, you know what I mean?
And
So
then
I
they
think we
light
get
up
so
when they
down
start
on
doing it
ourselves.
too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, so it gives them that extra little like, oh, okay, I can do this,
That's
So,
awesome. Well, thank you so
yeah.
much for coming on, and that's a very actionable piece of advice that people can do. And it's also, I mean, it might be a little fearful, I guess, getting started of like asking people like, what do you think I'm good at? But I mean, one or two people in, you're gonna be like, yeah, this is a fun question to ask. I'm good at a lot of things. Yeah. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, and I'll have all the resources that we talked about below, our podcast link below, and look forward to having you on again soon. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Brian. I greatly appreciate it.